What is happening in this particular case is not actually about the law. It is very clearly and unambiguously about politics, politics, politics. And specifically, the reason that this case all along has been the crown jewel of all of the various moving parts against Donald Trump is because it gets to this overarching theory, which has, I would argue, at least has indirectly abetted multiple assassination attempts against the president, that he is a unique historical threat to our democracy. This is the case. This is the purported legal element to their broader political push that Donald Trump is this historical threat. That is why they have to go all in, facts be damned.
All right, with me now is senior counsel for the Article 3 Project. He also hosts one of my favorite podcasts, and you guys know that I'm really picky about what podcasts I listen to. It's called America on Trial with Josh Hammer. The man himself joins us. Josh, good to see you.
Great to see you, my friend.
Okay, talk to me about this new filing. So Judge Tanya Chutkan unsealed a Jack Smith filing, 165 pages. He apparently found these new charges to levy at President Trump. Evidently, this new filing was aimed to convince the judge that Trump's actions were taken as a private citizen, even though he was president at the time, versus taken as the president because of the Supreme Court ruling on immunity. And I know everything I just said needs to be untangled because I think we all want to understand exactly how this lawfare is continuing to be aimed at President Trump. So can you walk us through exactly what's happening this week?
Yeah, so there's a lot of moving parts. So I guess let's zoom out and then we can zoom in here. Yeah. So let's just reset the conversation and reestablish that what is happening when it comes to the lawfare against one of the two major parties' presidential candidates is historically unprecedented. There has never been anything remotely like this, not anything even close to this. So there are 4 criminal prosecutions against Donald Trump. There are 2 federal prosecutions from so-called special counsel Jack Smith. By the way, Liz, I call him so-called special counsel Jack Smith because Judge Aileen Cannon here in Florida, where I live, has properly found him to be illegitimately appointed as a special counsel.
Why is that, by the way?
Well, because there's not actually a direct statute that Merrick Garland has pointed to as to enable him to do so. And as it says in the Constitution, you can only make these lower positions by law, which raises the obvious question, what is the law? And the DOJ then kind of snaps back at Justice Clarence Thomas, at Judge Aileen Cannon, those who question and say, oh, there are 4 kind of obscure provisions here where the abstract at broad vague language kind of delegates us the authority, but that's not really how it works. It's kind of statutory interpretation 101. In fact, the late, great Justice Anthony Scalia famously said that Congress does not hide elephants in mouse holes, which is a fancy way of saying that if there is a big authority, Congress speaks very clearly on that. And in recent years, the Supreme Court has called this the major questions doctrine. Justice Gorsuch is a big proponent of that doctrine. But in any event, Jack Smith is trying to bring 2 prosecutions. The classified documents case in Mar-a-Lago is on ice. The January 6th case, we'll come back to that one in just a second. And then you have the 2 local or state cases. There's the hush money case from Alvin Bragg in New York City, where he's been found guilty. We all know how ludicrous that is. Sentencing is allegedly happening after the November election. Then the Fonnie Wills case in Georgia, which is also currently on ice, at least until December. So then returning to, and by the way, there's also the Tish James civil fraud case where they found Trump and the Trump organization liable for $460, give or take, $1 million, utterly insane stuff there. They also tried to remove him from the ballot in Colorado. Let's not forget that. That was the Trump versus Anderson case at the U.S. Supreme Court, which, thank God, mercifully resulted in a 9-0 vindication for Donald Trump, a rare show of a unanimous rejection of a very bespoke theory whereby Colorado Democrats had said that under the insurrection clause of the 14th Amendment, this abstruse 1868 provision, therefore he is similar to Stonewall Jackson, and he cannot run for office because he is like a Confederate insurrection garbage. They rejected it. So
right, because by the way, you and I have talked about this before, but you can't just, these politicians in Colorado can't just unanimously, or unilaterally, I should say, not unanimously, unilaterally declare that he's an insurrectionist. There was no conviction that ever said that he was guilty of an insurrection. So what are they? Do they just have the authority to say, oh, we think you're an insurrectionist, therefore we can remove you from the ballot without any due process of law?
Right. So that was maybe the single clearest issue there. There were like 5 or 6 different reasons that Colorado was in the wrong. So real quick, and then I promise we'll get to Jack Smith. But real quick, what happened was over a year ago now, I think it was August of 2023, you had 2 law professors, Will Bode and Michael Stokes Paulson. I actually know both of them. Will Bode I had not for 1, but for 2 classes at University of Chicago Law School. He was one of my favorite professors. But I mean, he is a classic case of TDS, Trump derangement syndrome, along with his co-author Michael Stokes Paulson. They laid out this elaborate theory on the insurrection clause. It was actually immediately replied to by these two other law professors, Josh Blackman and Seth Tillman. And in their lengthy response, they identify at least 5 or 6 errors. What you said is one of them. But thankfully, the Supreme Court rejected that 9-0. So the main lawfare issue, as you mentioned right now, is the Jack Smith case, and the one in D.C., I should say. This has always been the crown jewel of the Democrat lawfare complex's case. I have said since day one that this is the money case. This is the one that they are really putting most, if not all, of their eggs in their basket. And the reason that they are putting all of their eggs in this basket is because the underlying facts in the narrative cut to the very core of the argument that they are trying to make to the American people, which is that Donald Trump is a unique threat to our democracy. This is a prosecution about the 2020 election and January 6th. And his speech at the Ellipsis, and go make yourselves heard peacefully and patriotically is what he actually said, by the way, over at the Capitol. And for all those reasons, this has been the case that they have really tried to pursue. So that gets us then to the Trump versus immunity case. So at some point over the course of this case, Donald Trump's lawyers appealed and said, actually, you know what? Can you really do this? Because, our client was president of the United States. I mean, doesn't that mean that certain things that he says and does, you can't actually prosecute it for that? I mean, let's imagine this scenario. In 2011, Barack Obama, when he was president, assassinated U.S. citizen Anwar al-Awlaki in Yemen because he was an al-Qaeda agent who was posing an imminent threat to some sort of undefined interest in the region. Maybe it was a threat to U.S. military bases. I had no particular issue with that, but a lot of civil libertarians of both Republican and Democratic varieties had a huge problem with that. Would you want Barack Obama in that situation to face the possibility of being prosecuted for murder of a U.S. citizen without due process after he's president of the United States in a life or death situation? I would say probably not, but Democrats are not exactly known for their intellectual honesty in situations like this. So that was basically the argument that Donald Trump's lawyers made in the immunity case. The Supreme Court comes back in the Trump versus United States immunity case there. It's a 6-3 decision. The liberals on MSNBC, the 3 liberal justices, Sotomayor, Ketanji Brown Jackson, they're saying, oh, no one is above the law. Well, Liz, they're ignoring the most obvious question there. It's the most classic case of circular reasoning in the world, because the question is, well, what is the law? I mean, no one is above the law, but what is the law? Well, the law is that we have one person who is the president of the United States, and he alone has the executive power. Legal theorists call this unitary executive theory, which is a very overly worded bit of legalese to basically say that there is one president. He has the executive power, not the vice president, not the attorney general, not the comms director in DHS or HHS, whatever, not the local dog catcher. There is one person in America who has the executive power. Therefore, it is incumbent upon the Supreme Court to identify what that entails and how it applies to historically unprecedented lawfare. That's what the court did. I thought it was a robust, sound decision. Now, in response to that, going back to Jack Smith's case in Washington, D.C., Jack Smith then was tasked, and by the way, there was also the Fisher case before it proceeded. The Fisher case was a separate but related case involving the DOJ's highly tendentious prosecution of various J6ers by invoking a 2002 statute called the Sarbanes-Oxley Act. The Sarbanes-Oxley Act was passed in response to the Enron accounting scandal, and it has to do with corporate fraud. In fact, the problem that Congress was seeking to solve has to do with shredding documents. And nonetheless, because of the vague wording of a certain subsection of 1512, the statute, DOJ prosecutors going all the way up to the very top, including Jack Smith against Donald Trump in the D.C. case, tried to apply this to the actions on January 6th. And the Supreme Court very clearly said, no, you can't do that either. So in light of the immunity case, the Trump versus U.S. case, and the Fisher case, because 2 of the 4 counts against Donald Trump in D.C. are on that Sarbanes-Oxley Act provision. So Jack Smith had a decision to make, Liz. A reasonable prosecutor, to kind of go back and paraphrase Jim Comey from the summer of 2016. Do you remember that? How Jim Comey announced then that no reasonable prosecutor would bring this case against Hillary Clinton. So to channel Jim Comey, not something I do every day necessarily, but to channel Jim Comey, Jack Smith could have looked at the immunity case and the Fisher case, and then spoken into the camera and said, at this point, no reasonable prosecutor would continue this case. I give up. He obviously didn't do that because he's a hack, because he is the hitman for the Democrat lawfare complex, as I have called him time and time again. He is someone who has arrived at his conclusions, and the facts be damned, he will reverse engineer what he has to do in order to reach his preordained conclusion. So he files this superseding indictment, which makes wholly cosmetic changes. As Jonathan Turley, the George Washington law professor, put it in an op-ed for The Hill the other day, it's basically like ordering a Mountain Dew. The cashier gives you a bottle of Coke. You say, I didn't order this. I ordered Mountain Dew, pouring then the Coke into the Mountain Dew and saying, here you go. It's wholly cosmetic changes. It's the same old wine in new wineskins, to paraphrase the biblical statement, I guess. And at this point, the jig is really up, because Jack Smith is now trying to make his newly refiled brief public. In fact, he has done so despite Trump's lawyers' proper objections. Judge Tanya Chutkan has let him get away with doing that. And the reason for doing this, Liz, is extraordinarily straightforward, and I'll end on this note. The reason for him doing this is because it's October in a presidential election, and this is the theory of the case for the Democrats and the Democrat lawfare complex, is that Donald Trump is a unique historical threat to democracy. Therefore, from their perspective, it is incumbent on them to get all 165 very vivid, graphic pages out there of this overly lawyered brief talking about how he's an insurrectionist, he's a fascist, he did this, he did that, he's a threat to our democracy there. But even liberals are waking up to this, or at least some of them are. Elie Honig is the chief senior legal analyst for CNN. Elie Honig blasted this, said that this is a norms-breaking practice. I think he wrote that for the New Yorker or New York Magazine or some liberal publication out there. So there are some smart liberals that are waking up to what is going on here and what Jack Smith is really trying to do. But unfortunately, Liz, or perhaps fortunately, I guess we'll see, it ultimately is up really to the American people to reject this at the ballot box.
In all the time that we've been alive, the U.S. dollar has always been the primary currency, but that may not be the case much longer. The U.S. dollar is facing unprecedented inflation. I don't need to tell you this. Just think about how much you paid when you filled up your car with gas this week, or how much you're paying for groceries. And our politics, of course, is getting increasingly unstable, and I don't see that stopping. If we think 2024 is unstable, just wait until 2025. The government is also looking to take total control over our money with a new digital dollar. Remember last week we talked about the UN's new pact for the future and how they want everyone to use digital dollars. Yeah, that's not going away. This is why it has never been more important that we take control over our own wealth. Don't let your life savings become a casualty of failing banks or currency wars. Now is the time to call the only precious metal dealer that I trust, American Hartford Gold. They'll show you how to protect your savings, your retirement accounts, by diversifying your wealth portfolio with physical gold and silver. My husband and I just did this for our wealth, converted it into physical gold and silver for protection, for our family, for the future. American Hartford Gold, by the way, is a great company because they support content just like this that's committed to bringing you the truth. Tell them I sent you, and they'll give you up to $15,000 of free silver on your first order. It's pretty big. Call them right now. Click the link in the description of this episode or call 866-996-5172. That's 866-996-5172. Or if you prefer text messaging, you can text my name, Liz, to 998899. Again, the phone number is 866-996-5172 or text Liz to 998899. Yeah, and by the way, the bombshells that are supposed to be inside of this new 165-page filing are quite something to behold. I want to read a couple of these because you might think, oh, what did they find? I believe Jack Smith actually said that the reason that he refiled this is upon reading the evidence again, upon looking at it a second time, he saw things that he didn't see the first time, which imagine giving that excuse if you were like a low-level litigator, if you were a first year out of law school, if you saw things the second time that you didn't see the first after already filing charges, you'd be fired immediately. Like the fact that the idea that he would see things the second time that he didn't the first, I find to be patently absurd. I don't find that to be believable. But the bombshells that are supposedly inside of this document are overheard conversations, and I'm going to add a word, allegedly overheard conversations between Trump and his family or between Trump and his staff, heard by other staff members. I give that a big eye roll, just the premise of it to begin with. So we're gonna say that this is all about eavesdropping then? Okay. And a couple of the things that were allegedly overheard is Donald Trump allegedly said to his family, to Ivanka, Jared Kushner, maybe to Melania, that, quote, "It doesn't matter if you win or lose, you have to fight like hell." Am I missing something, Josh? Because I don't find that to be, obviously not illegal, but I don't even find that to be objectionable. Like, he didn't even invent that. Everybody in the world has said that statement before. How is this new information?
Yeah, I'm pretty sure that "fight like hell" has been a political a political phrase going back at least as far as the Roman Senate and like the stabbing of Julius Caesar. I mean, like, do you really want to go back that far? I mean, I was at it. I actually, my wife and I were at an event at Trump Doral last night. That's actually where I saw you in person not so long ago. So we were back there last night for an event with President Trump about the October 7th commemoration, and the crowd just started chanting at one point, "Fight, fight, fight."
Yes.
I mean, what is controversial about this? I mean,
well, all these people can probably now expect to be indicted, just like the J6 defendants are, for fomenting violence and insurrection, because the word "fight," of course, is violent rhetoric. It's not something that everyone says in the course of action, and no one means to be physical. No one means physically, like, don't go out and punch someone on the left here. Here's another thing. So apparently in, I think this was in Detroit, so in Michigan on election night, there was a Trump staffer who was responding to a batch of ballots that had just been counted that were leaning heavily towards Joe Biden, maybe more so than is realistic. I guess that sort of doesn't matter one way or the other. And he texted with someone on the ground in Detroit and said, "Make them riot." This is one of the bombshells, Josh, apparently.
Yeah, I mean, this is just such a thin read. I mean, make them riot. I mean, didn't Donald Trump say a very long time ago, "Don't take me literally"? I mean, like, no one takes this actually literally. First of all, the legal threshold to actual incitement to violence is very, very high. It goes back to a 1960s case called Brandenburg versus Ohio, and the court has consistently said for 60 years now that, and I don't have the exact verbiage from the Brandenburg case memorized verbatim, but they basically say that in order to actually have a not First Amendment protected speech, whereby it can actually be a prosecutable incitement to violence, there has to be a clear, unambiguous, direct, imminent threat to someone's physical safety. I mean, it is a very, very high evidentiary empirical threshold. As you and I were saying earlier, if you go back and look at what Donald Trump said at the White House ellipsis on January 6th, which really is the bread and butter of this broader case there, he could not have been clear about this. He literally said, "Go make yourselves heard peacefully and patriotically." And last I checked, I think he condemned what was happening at the Capitol fairly quickly. I mean, within an hour or two. I don't have the exact timeline memorized, but he said, "Stop! Like, don't do this."
Well, that's the other thing that the Democrats try to hack him for. They were like, "You didn't do it the second you saw it on TV. You waited to see what happened, and therefore that means you were encouraging it because you waited an hour and two versus the first time you saw a tweet," which is, again, ridiculous to now criminalize the length of time it takes someone to tweet. Okay.
Yeah, I mean, who wants to Monday morning quarterback this particular game? I mean, Joe Biden just took 5 days to mobilize the federal government in response to a historically unprecedented hurricane that has permanently tarred Western North Carolina, a very scenic region, home of the nation's most visited national park, Smoky Mountain National Park. He took 5 days to mobilize really any part of the entire U.S. federal government to get these people aid, and they frankly still are doing a horrible job to this very day of doing that. I mean, two can play this game. And if you actually really want to do an apples-to-apples comparison, 5 days to mobilize the government to Western North Carolina versus taking like an additional half an hour when it comes to January 6th. But the point is that this is not a law. That really is the key point here, Liz, and probably the number one point that I want to emphasize to the viewers. And I say this as a lawyer. You and I have talked about the law for a very long time. I clerked on the Fifth Circuit Court of Appeals 6 years ago. I speak at law schools all across the country to this day. What is happening in this particular case is not actually about the law. It is very clearly and unambiguously about politics, politics, politics. And specifically, the reason that this case all along has been the crown jewel of all of the various moving parts against Donald Trump is because it gets to this overarching theory, which has, I would argue, at least has indirectly abetted multiple assassination attempts against the president, that he is a unique historical threat to our democracy. This is the case. This is the purported legal element to their broader political push that Donald Trump is this historical threat. That is why they have to go all in, facts be damned.
Don't kid yourself. It's not just our country as a whole that's at stake. The future of the Supreme Court is on the ballot this fall. The radical left wants to eliminate the court's conservative majority by packing the Supreme Court with their own handpicked justices. We're talking about judicial activists of the worst order in order to get the political outcomes that they want. Even President Biden has gotten into this act by making reforming the court, that's the euphemism he uses, one of his final priorities before he leaves office. But don't be fooled by that euphemism. Their end game is just old-fashioned court packing. At First Liberty, they have a great name for this. They call this assault on the court what it really is, a Supreme Court coup. A Supreme Court coup. And the frightening thing about this is that come January, their plan could become our nation's reality. Simple majority votes in the House, the Senate, combined with the president's signature, could turn their plan to pack the court into the law of our land. That's why we're sounding the alarm and why we need you to help us. If we take action together, you and I, if we unite our voices, we can put a stop to the radical left's plan to take control of the Supreme Court. As the 2024 election approaches, we're less than 1 month now from this election, we need to do 3 things. Number 1, find out where each of your candidates stands on the radical issue of packing and purging the court. Then number 2, share what you learn with everyone you know. And number 3, do your civic duty and vote. The future of the court, preserving it as an independent judiciary versus an arm of the Democrat Party, is literally in our hands. If we lose the court, we will lose the country. That's why First Liberty is taking action. They need all of us to join them. With patriots like you standing for the Supreme Court, we can safeguard the independence of the judiciary just as the founding fathers intended. Go to supremecoup.com/Liz. That's supremecoup.com/Liz to learn how you can help stop the radical left's takeover of the Supreme Court. So what's going to happen given this new filing? What's Chuck going to do? And then what's going to happen to this case?
Well, Judge Chutkan is a hostile judge. We should be fairly clear about that. She has said a lot of anti-Trump things in the past. What I personally am waiting to see happen, is for there to be what we call a circuit split on the issue as to whether Jack Smith is actually legitimately appointed in the first place. So as I said earlier, Judge Aileen Cannon here in the Southern District of Florida back in July in a fairly compelling 93-page opinion in which she mirrored a lot of arguments that Justice Clarence Thomas made in his own concurring opinion in the immunity case. Judge Cannon basically found that Jack Smith was not legitimately appointed because there is no actual statute that Merrick Garland has pointed to name his position there. Judge Chutkan has denied those arguments. And down in the Florida case, right now, that appeal is pending before the 11th Circuit in Georgia. We should get oral arguments coming up in just the next few weeks. So at that point, if then Trump's lawyers can then try to appeal Chutkan's denial of their arguments on that same charge in D.C., if they can then appeal that to the D.C. Circuit, I'm thinking there's a way to kind of circuit split this and fast track this to the U.S. Supreme Court. Probably not before the election at this point because it's coming up imminently, and SCOTUS has just started their new term. They're quite busy these days. But that could be one possible next step. The most obvious next step, if Donald Trump wins the election, is that it just dies. Is that Jack Smith is fired the next day, and both of these prosecutions go away tomorrow. That is certainly my preferred remedy. That is certainly my preferred resolution there. But if he loses, a circuit split is probably going to be the most likely outcome here. I think ultimately it's going to die one way or the other. It basically depends whether or not we take the easy way or the hard way. But there's no way that Donald Trump is going to ultimately be found guilty of these particular charges. And those charges are going to be sustained by the D.C. Circuit, let alone the U.S. Supreme Court.
How do you think the Supreme Court would rule if it does make it all the way to that bench?
I do not think they would view this particularly sympathetically. First of all, I think that there are quite possibly 5 votes to say that Jack Smith is not a legitimate special counsel. So Clarence Thomas's concurring opinion didn't get anyone to sign on with it, but a lot of these justices are known not to, you might say, gratuitously sign on if the issue is not squarely presented there. I bet that Alito, Gorsuch, probably Kavanaugh would agree with the Thomas argument there. But even conceding that they actually reached the merits there, Liz, we're dealing with free speech. I mean, we fundamentally are. I mean, this prosecution is ultimately a free speech case. That really is what it is. And if there is one constitutional issue that the current Supreme Court has been very good at affirming time and time again, with at least one glaring exception, the big tech case of Murphy versus Missouri, that was a massive defeat for free speech, albeit they did it on procedural grounds because there was no standing. I think that was a mistake. But when they actually reached the merits of First Amendment free speech protection, this court time and time again does the right thing. They had the case of the Christian wedding website designer out of Colorado. I believe that was last term in 2023. That is just one notable example from recent years. But I honestly couldn't even tell you the last time that the Supreme Court has ruled the wrong way on free speech, which for all of my criticisms of the federal judiciary as it currently stands is actually a very nice silver lining. So I think that they actually would defend Donald Trump's right to free speech and not seek to criminalize more political speech than our tradition and our case law currently holds. Political speech being, of course, the very bread and butter. Political speech is literally the sine qua non of the First Amendment. It is the reason that we have a First Amendment in the first place there. So I think Smith would be found illegitimate probably before then, but if it reaches the merits, I think Trump still prevails.
I hope so. So go down to Georgia for a second, the Fani Willis case. Fani Willis's daughter, by the way, was just arrested. And I'm not laughing at the arrest. She's 24 years old, I believe. She was pregnant. She was driving. She was on her phone while she was driving, which obviously endangers herself and her unborn child. And she was driving with a suspended license. So after this arrest happened, Fani Willis was called to the scene. And guess who she brought with her? She brought Nathan Wade with her. Nathan Wade, her supposedly ex-lover, who she appointed to be part of this prosecution of Donald Trump. No explanation why they were together if they are not still together in that sense. What do you think is going to happen? You said before that this case is a little bit on ice, at least until after the election. What's going to happen?
So let's backtrack here. So what happened was we know, thanks to a Trump co-defendant in Georgia named Michael Roman, a former RNC operative. So Michael Roman's lawyers did a great public service back in January, where they first flagged for the public the idea that Fani Willis had been shacking up with her own hired special prosecutor, because that was previously unknown. It was actually Michael Roman's lawyers who found this, presented it. That's how we got all these dramatic evidentiary hearings back in February. Fani Willis storming into that courtroom where she was all angry and huffing and puffing there. I thought that she was going to pull. TV. It was great TV. I thought that she was going to try to misappropriate Clarence Thomas's famous line from 1991 about this being a high-tech lynching, which was accurate in the case of Clarence Thomas. It would have been wholly misapplied for Fani Willis, but that's kind of what her body language made it look like. So the judge there, Scott McAfee, who was the Fulton County Superior Court judge, basically the trial court judge overseeing this case, Scott McAfee tries to do this very clumsy Solomonic split the baby remedy, whereby he basically says, okay, there's at least a perceived conflict of interest here, maybe not an actual, but at least a perceived, okay, so one of you has to go. So he's trying to be too cute by half. He's trying to do this whole John Roberts-esque thing whereby you try to divvy up breadcrumbs to give both sides their favor. John Roberts, the Chief Justice, is infamous for doing this. McAfee should have had the courage of his convictions and actually followed the law. And in Georgia, it's not just an actual empirically established conflict of interest, but even a widespread perception of a possible corruption, of a conflict of interest. If the public perceives it to be a conflict, then that is cause to get rid of this in the first place. So he should have had the courage of his convictions and said that Fulton County cannot possibly bring this case. Therefore, it has to be removed to a different county of Georgia if it doesn't die. So ever since then, we've been trying to figure out whether or not Scott McAfee's Solomonic baby splitting remedy is actually going to hold up. And it took a little while, but the Georgia Court of Appeals, I think it was in May, 2 months later, give or take, where they said, okay, we're actually going to hear this case. We are going to make a determination as to whether or not McAfee got this right. And we've basically been on ice ever since then. So at one point, they were going to retake the baton and hear arguments over this disqualification argument here in the month of October. That got delayed till past the election in December. So we're still waiting. We're still waiting to see whether or not the Georgia Court of Appeals is going to ultimately uphold or to overturn Scott McAfee's remedy. If they overturn it, then Fani Willis is done. Then she cannot bring this case any longer. I guess she would appeal to the Georgia Supreme Court, but probably not going to happen, to be honest with you. So in all likelihood, at that point, it would be done. So it would then go back to the regulatory body that governs all of the various DA offices, all the various county prosecution offices, and they could maybe assign it to a different county, or they might honestly decide just to drop it at that point. Either way, it's good for Donald Trump because this is happening in Fulton County, where Atlanta is, which is by far the most left-wing Democratic county in the whole state of Georgia.
Going online unprotected is like leaving your door unlocked when you leave your house. We just can't do that anymore in our society. Now, maybe you can trust some of your neighbors, and that's great. But what about that creepy guy down the block? What about delivery drivers, random strangers? Do you really trust all of them? Well, the answer to that is obviously no. With ExpressVPN, you can stay safe online without having to trust just any random stranger who may want to peek at what you're doing. Every time you connect to an unencrypted network in a cafe, a hotel, airport, etc., your online data is not secure. Any hacker on the same network can gain access to everything. They can steal your personal data, your password, your bank login, your credit card details. And it actually doesn't take much technical knowledge to hack someone. You just need cheap hardware, and a smart 12-year-old could do it. Your data is valuable. Hackers can make up to $1,000 per person selling personal information on the dark web. ExpressVPN stops hackers from stealing your data by creating a secure, encrypted tunnel between your device and the internet. ExpressVPN is the best because it's super secure. It's really easy to use. It works well on phones, laptops, tablets, and more, so you can stay secure on the go. It's how I keep my family safe. It's how we keep ourselves safe at the office. I use ExpressVPN whenever I do show prep or talk to sources. My privacy is extremely important to me, personally and professionally. Secure your data online today by visiting expressvpn.com/Liz. That's expressvpn.com/Liz, and you can get an extra 3 months free. That's expressvpn.com/Liz. So do you foresee, and this could be before the election or after the election, do you foresee the Democrats bringing any of these cases to the point where they actually sentence Donald Trump to prison and try to put him there behind bars?
Well, the hush money case is by far the most likely. Because
that's Alvin Bragg and the Manhattan district attorney.
Yeah, this is the Soros-funded hack, Alvin Bragg, who has ignored at least 3 or 4 different elements of the actual underlying law. He has ignored flagrant statute of violations problems, statute of limitation problems, excuse me. I mean, he has done so many wrong things there that I would not even know where to begin. Nonetheless, he got his guilty verdict. The judge, Juan Rashan, of course, should have recused in this case. He donated $20 to the Biden-Harris campaign 2020 and earmarked it by literally writing "Stop Trump." His daughter has been involved in raising millions and millions of dollars for Kamala Harris and other Democratic candidates. But they got their guilty verdict. So that sentencing was going to happen in July. Then it was punted to September. Now it's punted until after the election. So
why was that, by the way, punted till after the election? I mean, procedurally, I think we all know why it was politically.
Well, procedurally, I guess if you want to be charitable, they said they wanted more time. They wanted more time to deliberate as to whether or not Donald Trump's lawyers had an argument as to whether or not this should be dismissed based on the immunity case. I mean, that's what Trump's lawyers are now arguing in New York City, is that because of the immunity case at the U.S. Supreme Court, therefore, part of what Alvin Bragg and his prosecutors brought in the New York City case has to be dismissed because it involved official Article 2 presidential conduct. Namely here, it's the fact that Alvin Bragg brought 2 witnesses, Hope Hicks and Madeleine Westerhout, who worked in the Trump White House. And therefore, these were 2 witnesses who were testifying, at least in part, to activity that happened while he was present. For that reason, and that reason alone, what I have argued is that this thing is tainted and has to be thrown out. And basically the whole case should ultimately be dismissed and a mistrial should be declared. That's what I've been arguing. So I think in theory, Merchan is indulging this a little bit more. He probably is never going to rule in that favor. But I guess that is the ostensible fig leaf that he is getting at. But he's probably going to reject it. He's already indicated that he's not particularly sympathetic to it. So he's probably just going to reject it again when it comes up again. So then the question is, what is the sentence actually going to be? I do not think that they are going to purport to sentence him to jail. I am fairly black-pilled about the legal system. I do not claim to be particularly confident in this prediction, but I don't think so for at least 2 reasons. One is a very simple, practical, on-the-ground reason, which is this man is president of the United States, and he has 24/7 Secret Service. Query how good of a job that Secret Service is currently doing. Although they had bomb-sniffing dogs at Doral last night when I saw the president, and it seemed like last night was under control. So maybe they've learned a lesson. But the point is that he has 24/7 armed security. If you're literally going to sentence the president of the United States to like Rikers Island in New York City, how does that work? Because New York City municipal jails do not allow firearms anywhere remotely near the premises. So maybe you could build like a whole new wing of the penitentiary in the land that they clearly do not have to offer. But I'm just not seeing it. And it's constitutional law 101. Under the supremacy clause of Article 6, it is constitutional law 101 that federal law always reigns supreme over state law when there is a clear conflict, and Secret Service protection is going to reign supreme over whatever kind of dispensation they purport to make for Rikers Island. So that's a very practical, nitty-gritty reason. It's obviously disgusting that we're even having this conversation, but that's the road that these people have taken us down. The slightly broader, more philosophical reason that I'm skeptical that they are going to do this, and admittedly, I am not fully confident in this, is that, look, there is breaking norms, and then there is just taking just a flamethrower and trying to burn down the entire republic. And, you want to do the latter, and that's basically what they'd be doing here, honestly.
Well, to be frank, that's the argument that I make why I think they will try to put him in prison. I don't know when. I don't think that they'll try to do it until they want that to happen, because these are revolutionaries that we're talking about. These aren't just your grandpa's Democrat Party. These are people who actually do want to burn down the republic. And I think that's going to be their vanguard when they want it to happen, when they want violence, when they want riots in the streets, when they are ready to actually put everything that they have prepped into action. That's what they're going to do. But I suppose we'll have to wait and see. Josh Hammer, thanks for being on the show. Guys, you can understand why I listen to America on Trial with Josh Hammer. Josh, where do you want people to subscribe? Apple, Spotify, YouTube? Where can they find it?
Yeah, thanks so much, Liz. So I host America on Trial with Josh Hammer, then also my other show, The Josh Hammer Show. They're both on Apple, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts.
All right, there you go. Thanks, Josh.
Thanks, Liz.
I've got something really exciting to share with you today. They say no one reads anymore, but I know, at least with this audience, you guys are special. You guys actually value the truth and pursue knowledge. I know that's not true. Our best and most important ideas are still captured in print, which is wonderful, which is why we at Blaze Media have decided to launch a premium quarterly magazine called Frontier. The thing is absolutely beautiful. It's packed with thoughtful commentary, stunning photography, and original journalism that highlights the people who refuse to back down. I'm talking Chris Rufo, Mark Levin, Glenn Beck, and that's just the first issue. And this isn't just a magazine. We're planting a flag in the ground. I think you're really going to love it. Frontier's just the beginning, too. As part of our new Blaze Unlimited membership, you'll get exclusive access to Frontier delivered right to your door, along with a whole lot more. Blaze Unlimited is about taking another step forward, fighting back against state-run media, propaganda, the forces trying to tear down the foundations of our country. As a founding member of Blaze Unlimited, you'll receive a limited edition founding members card, even more behind-the-scenes content, VIP event access, and here's the big one: the chance to have your voice heard. We want you to help shape the future of Blaze Media and push back against the mainstream machine that's doing everything it can to silence the truth. This membership is about more than just sitting on the sidelines. It's about actively joining the mission to defend free speech and uphold the American way of life. If you are ready to take the next step in this fight, go to blazeunlimited.com/Liz to claim your spot. Don't wait. Founding member spots are limited, but it's because we know this isn't going to be for everyone. But if it's for you, let's stand together, push back, and keep the spirit of America alive. Join Blaze Unlimited today. Go to blazeunlimited.com/Liz. All right, you guys submitted questions for a Q&A for today's show, and you submitted them on Instagram and on X. I appreciate them, and we're going to scroll through and answer some. So let's start here. Michael Battaglia says, "Hi, Liz. Do you think parish priests should stand against abortion no matter the fallback?" Oh, of course, obviously. Abortion is a grave moral evil. All people who claim to be Christians should stand against it unequivocally. Chris says, "What's your favorite pastry?" Oh, I'm really not a sugar person. I'm not a sweet person. I'm a salty person. So, man, you put a bag of potato chips in my hand and I will probably have zero self-control. It'll be gone within a couple of minutes. But I probably am a pretty easy pass on like pastry and cake and stuff. Stuart says, "Can America ever trust the election process? Can Americans ever trust the election process?" Listen, I'm kind of cynical about that after 2020. I want to say yes, because it's important that we do trust it or else it won't work. But let's just say I think it's been infiltrated. I think that the trust in our election process has been penetrated by the left's cheating. And I don't think Republicans have done enough between 2020 and 2024 to convince me that they're not going to cheat again. Chrissy says, "What's your honest, unfiltered opinion of Governor Newsom?" I lived in California for almost a decade, and I think that he is a bad person. I think that he is committed to probably even more than radical leftist, the radical leftist label would describe. I mean, when he locked down California. I lived in California during COVID, and I think it was March 19th of 2020 when Gavin Newsom told us we had to stay in our houses. I had to literally take my press pass with me because I worked for a news network at the time. I had to take my press pass in the car if I wanted to drive my car because we were worried that Gavin Newsom's police officers would stop us and not allow us to even leave our homes unless we had an essential employees, some kind of document that called us an essential employee like a press pass. That's evil. Gavin Newsom has done evil things to the state of California. It was Gavin Newsom who signed the law that said that crisis pregnancy centers, pro-life centers, had to advertise free abortions. Thankfully, the Supreme Court overturned that, but that's the kind of thing Gavin Newsom does. Gavin Newsom is a bad, bad dude. A very bad dude. Joseph says, the Catholic vote is important in elections. Do you think the pro-abort rhetoric ruins demographic trust? Yes. I think, of course, it does. Obviously, it does. I am more pro-life than Donald Trump. We've talked about this on the show before. I'm more pro-life than most politicians, unfortunately, including Republicans. I don't think that Catholics and Christians should not vote. They shouldn't refuse to vote for Donald Trump just because we are more pro-life than he is. We should use our voices to pressure him to be more pro-life. But I think it was Father Ripperger who spoke to this, especially towards Catholic voters and Christians voters, and said, we have an obligation to analyze which two candidates, if we have two imperfect candidates, which is the lesser of two evils, because it's not that we are validating the imperfect views on abortion. Let's be specific here on abortion. We're not validating Donald Trump's position on abortion. What we're doing is we're preserving the good that exists between Donald Trump's position and Kamala Harris's vastly inferior position. There's no doubt that Kamala Harris's position will result in more abortion. So by voting for Donald Trump, you're not saying that you agree with his position on abortion. You're saving the lives that Kamala Harris would otherwise allow to be killed. So yes, pro-abortion rhetoric does deflate people. It's discouraging to people. A lot of people stay home because of it. I think that it's not correct analysis. That's not good discernment to stay home. But Donald Trump could take care of that problem by being more pro-life. And we should encourage him to do so. Health insurance is so confusing. It's so expensive. It's just so frustrating. And I don't need to tell you this, but claim denials are becoming more and more common. Did you know that 1 out of every 5 Obamacare claims were denied last year? This feels personal to me because a lot of my healthcare I end up paying out of pocket for because my insurance, even though I have it, doesn't cover what I need to be covered. It's unacceptable. The headache of health insurance is exactly why Crowd Health was created. Let me tell you about Crowd Health. Crowd Health is not health insurance. It is a better way to pay for healthcare through crowdfunding. I cannot stand dealing with health insurance at all anymore. I'm just done. But with Crowd Health, it's a totally different experience. For $175 for an individual or $575 for a family of 4 or more, you will get access to a community of people who are willing to help you out in the event of an emergency. You'll get access to telemedicine visits, discounted prescriptions, and so much more without doctors' networks getting in the way. And of course, you'll join the crowd, a group of members just like you and me who want to help each other pay for unexpected medical events. Let Crowd Health help you with your healthcare needs. Get started today for just $99 per month for your first 3 months. And stop for a second and compare that $99 a month rate to how much you're paying for premiums every month for your health insurance. Go to joincrowdhealth.com, promo code Liz. Joincrowdhealth.com, promo code Liz. Crowd Health is not insurance. You can learn more at joincrowdhealth.com. That's joincrowdhealth.com, promo code Liz. A lot of religious questions. I like this, guys. Someone says, hello, Liz. I don't know if you've been asked this before, but as a Catholic, do you make time to pray the rosary? Yes, I do. Every day. JC says, Hillary Clinton is pushing leftist propaganda 24/7. Is she afraid of something big? Oh, yes. Okay, so it's actually a fun activity if you have a little free time to look at all of Hillary Clinton's recent media hits because her eyes wider than normal. She is petrified of what? Well, she's petrified that Donald Trump is going to win again because the absolute bane of Hillary Clinton's existence is Donald Trump. Donald Trump, her entire life. Think of everything that she sacrificed, everything that she gave up, every bad thing that she did was in pursuit of one thing. Hillary Clinton as president of the United States. And who was the foil that prevented that from happening? Well, you could say it was you and I by voting for Donald Trump, but she only looks at Donald Trump and thinks he's the reason that I didn't achieve the only thing I ever wanted in this life. Was president of the United States. So she's afraid of that again, which is why she's telling social media companies that they need to crack down on free speech because she doesn't want the truth about Kamala Harris to be known. She doesn't want us to hear Donald Trump's words for ourselves because when you hear Donald Trump's words, you know he's not the dictator authoritarian that the left accuses him of being. But yeah, Hillary Clinton right now, it's almost amusing to watch if she weren't so diabolical. Mario says, what if J.D. Vance is a mole? Since being picked as VP, there's been 2 attempts on Trump. No, that's not actually correct. First of all, ridiculous. He's not a mole. But the first assassination attempt against Donald Trump was on July 13th. And it was the week later. It was actually just a couple days after that the RNC began. And it was during the RNC that Donald Trump announced that J.D. Vance was his running mate. And I know because I was in the green room with Tucker Carlson when that was announced at the RNC. Hish says, does Israel have capability to destroy nuclear sites in Iran? Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. They definitely could. Now, I suppose you could ask, should they or not? Because that is a question of should that be done? Not because Iran deserves a nuclear weapon. They shouldn't. We should do everything we can to prevent that from happening because they call America and Israel, both Israel and America, the little Satan and the great Satan. They want to aim those nuclear weapons, not just at Israel, but at you and me here in the United States. But there would be repercussions if Israel completely took out Iran's nuclear capacity. Are we ready for war with Iran, international war? And that's a valid question to be asked, but do they have the capacity? You know they do. Of course they do. Okay, now going over to X. A lot of questions over here. What's the plan? This is from Uni. What's the plan to counter the obvious Democrat voter fraud and subsequent fraud fortifications a la 2020? You know, I wish that I had a better answer to this. I don't think that the Republican Party adequately addressed what happened in 2020 to prevent that from happening again in 2024. So what I advise Republicans in the next month, because a month from now will be post-election, is be very careful when you are identifying what shady business is happened during the election or the lead up to the election, whether it's electioneering, whether it's outright fraud. This time, if we think something fishy happened, just wait because we'll figure out what it is. And it's much more effective to be able to call out something specifically that you know happened and getting accountability for that. What happened in 2020 is there were a lot of accusations right after the election when we all knew something fishy had happened. But there were some people, even on Team Trump, who were in a hurry to say what that something fishy was, that they grabbed on to the first, sometimes wild accusation that they could. And it turned out that that wasn't the way. Those accusations weren't the way that the Democrats cheated. They had cheated in a different way. But it undermined the case that Trump was making, both in public opinion and in the courts, to have those false accusations made first. So let's not do that this time around. Let's wait and make sure that we understand how the Democrats cheated before we demand accountability. It'll be much more effective. And obviously, we shouldn't have to do that at all. The Republican Party should have prevented this from happening, but since they didn't, that's my advice. Suni says, we watched your show on The Blaze last night. Thank you. And you started with a prayer calling on Michael the Archangel. Are you trolling James Lindsay? No, first of all, James Lindsay is one of my good political friends. He and I disagree on some things. Obviously, I'm very religious. He's not religious at all. We have different takes on some political issues, but he's one of the smartest people in identifying what the Democrat Party's strategy is, especially what ideology underlies it. So even when we disagree on certain things, you're never going to see me engage in any kind of infighting. We have been asking for the intercession of St. Michael the Archangel to protect those of us who watch this show and our work. Those of us on the team here behind the scenes creating this, because we're in a spiritual warfare battle in the United States. That's what our politics is right now. And we've been doing that since the beginning of this show when we relaunched in July. It's only been recently that James Lindsay has come out saying that he's against that. And he said he was against that after Donald Trump posted the St. Michael the Archangel prayer on Michaelmas, which is the feast of St. Michael the Archangel. So no, I'm not trolling him. He's a friend of mine. When we do have disagreements, we just talk in person like adults about it. Mouse says, what is a woman? It should be such an obvious answer, isn't it? One of the most brilliant questions to unravel and expose the left's ideology, that they can't answer that question. We even have a Supreme Court Justice, Ketanji Brown Jackson, who won't answer that question. Pretty easy to answer it. If you have the DNA in the body of a woman, you are a woman. Derek says, why don't you help people in the hurricane? What do you mean? Like, why don't I go to North Carolina myself? Well, I'll answer this question. Why don't I go to North Carolina myself? Because I have a 3.5-year-old daughter and a 6-month-old daughter who count on me to take care of them. My husband and I take care of our children. Obviously, I'm the primary caregiver of our children, so I can't just abandon them and go to North Carolina. I don't know if you noticed, I weigh about 110 pounds, so I'm not exactly what you would call the primary physical specimen that you would choose to go and try to do physical manual labor in North Carolina and Georgia to save these people. If you're talking about financially, well, I have contributed to this effort. Not that it's any of your business what I do with my private charity, but I have. And then, of course, I use my platform here to expose FEMA, the corruption, the incompetence of the federal government, their abuse of taxpayer funds in order to try to help right that in order to help the people in the hurricane. So I don't know what kind of question that was, but Death LV says, what are your top 5 favorite PC video games? What do you think they are? Nothing. I don't have time to play video games. You know that. Main Mega says, do you think the Northeast will ever be red again? So nice username, Main Mega. You must be like the only person in Maine that's conservative. Actually, no. So what's interesting about the Northeast is it's not just the Northeast. I'll talk about Maine specifically because of all the stories that are coming out of Maine right now. Maine is very similar to California, believe it or not, in the sense that it's a very solidly blue state, but it's not because the majority of the population is radically left. It's because of where the leftists live in California and where the leftists live in Maine. So Portland, Maine, for example, very leftist. You go there, you look down the street and there's like a bunch of skinny people in black jeans, or a bunch of people in black skinny jeans, and you're like, is this a boy? Is this a girl? I can't really tell. And then you have like the people that you're like, okay, a man and a woman walking, like who's the man, who's the woman? Very leftist, let's just say that. And the same in California. You have, the cities, San Francisco, Los Angeles, very leftist, but the more rural areas of both Maine and California are red. They're more conservative, which is interesting because they, of course, make up the backbone of the state. I don't think either California or Maine, although specifically Maine, will become a red state again until they come alive a little bit more in their faith in religion, because there's not too many people who are red-pilled, at least long-term, unless they have belief in objective truth. Objective truth is natural law. Natural law is original justice that is, from our creator. If you don't define what good and bad is, good and evil, by using biblical principles, then you're really going to go astray pretty quickly. And Maine is a pretty irreligious state. If I'm not mistaken, the Catholic Church views it as a missionary outpost. It is so irreligious. Django says, do you think Puerto Rico will ever become a state? I hope not. I don't think the people of Puerto Rico want that. And I think the only reason that the Democrats here in the United States want that is because they think they can get 2 Democrat senators from it. So I don't think that would be good for anybody. What other questions here? Devo says, do you believe all vegans are woke and sanctimonious? I don't know if you're trolling me here because I am vegan, or whether you think that I'm woke and sanctimonious. No, I think it depends. If veganism is your religion, if you are eating that way because you think, Mother Earth and animals have souls and all of that, then oftentimes those people can be very evangelical in their beliefs. They want to impose it on everyone else. I eat it. You guys know this. I eat, I don't eat meat. I don't eat dairy. I don't eat gluten because I try to keep inflammation in my body low because I have autoimmune issues. I've talked about it on the show before. I hope it doesn't come off as woke or sanctimonious. I do not eat the Bill Gates fake meat that comes out of a lab. Ew. Definitely don't. David says, when are you going to be back on TV? I am on TV. You're watching this on TV right now. Go to blazetv.com/Liz and you can see my show Monday, Wednesday, and Friday at 5 p.m. Eastern. And you should go there. All right. This is the last question. Are you ready? Did Bigfoot exist? This is from Eli. I don't think so. But you know what they say about conspiracy theories? It's only a conspiracy theory for 5 minutes until we get proof that it's in fact true. That's been my experience in the last 10 years in politics. Guys, this was really fun. Thank you for all your questions. I know there were a lot we didn't get to, but this was fun. Make sure you subscribe. Go to Spotify. We're trying to boost the show over there. Go to Spotify and search The Liz Wheeler Show. Hit subscribe and then send it to your friends. I really appreciate it. Thank you for watching today. Thank you for listening. I'm Liz Wheeler. This is The Liz Wheeler Show.